We're back.
Hey,
mostly.
Wait, what? Where are you still in a secure location?
Yeah, it's less secure than it used to be.
Oh, okay, excellent. We are back. Welcome to another episode of Talking Upstream, which is literally my favorite show that comes on Sundays. Mostly when there's not any kind of football on. I'm just kidding. I'm not football. I have no idea. Anyway. So what we do on the show is we find some of our favorite creators and we pitch them ideas. We talk to them about why they do what they do, how they do what they do, what their process is, what their passion is, and just kind of try to talk our way up to a streaming service. Like Dylan says, we're trying to talk ourselves up to getting puffy because we want to sell out and get puffy and just give up and write.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we get to anybody, Dylan, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing
All
great.
right.
Dylan and I, we met a while ago, and how we met was I would just randomly go up to him and just pitch him stupid ideas or ask him stupid questions about like how my brain works. And one thing that I actually kind of locked onto, and I was like, hey, if you could yesterday a movie, or if you could yesterday a band, or if you could yesterday something, and then that in our little group kind of became a verb, which was to completely erase something from the memory and pretend that you came up with it. And I was under the impression that I was always going to yesterday the movie yesterday because I thought that was clever. And Dylan never answered me. But ironically, we reached out to the person that created the movie concept yesterday.
We'll get into it.
Maybe. All right, Dylan, do you want to introduce who our guest of the week is?
Yeah, so our guest this week is screenwriter and producer Jack Barth. Hello, how are you?
Good. Mr. Barth, how are you, sir?
Dandy, thanks.
First and foremost, thank you very much for taking your time to be on our stupid show. We really appreciate it. Talking to anybody who does anything, what we're trying to do really just motivates us and keeps us moving towards making something. So thank you. But for people that may not know who you are, would you like to let people know where you're most proud of or where people could find you?
Well, I've had an eclectic career. In fact, I think when I sold the script, my original script for yesterday, which is called Cover Version, I think when the film went into production, I became the oldest ever person to sell their first screenplay and see it made into a major film. In fact, I don't think anyone's ever come close. The last closest I could find was Raymond Chandler, and he was pretty well established as a novelist. Obviously, he wrote his first script when he was like in his 50s, and I was in my 60s when I sold my first screenplay and saw it made into a film.
And I mean, that's a pretty big film. I mean, I think everybody, knows the idea or the movie of yesterday. Do you want to get would you mind getting into what the concept was? What was the spark of that idea?
Yeah, because it actually did come out of my life to that point and into the way my career had gone. I'm someone who's kind of like always gets bored and just moves on to another kind of thing. And so that's not really a good recipe for success in the writing world. It's really much better just find your lane and just stay in it until you're discovered. I was a magazine writer, and then I became a book writer, and then I've always wanted to be in television, so I was writing and producing TV for about 20 years. And I actually went to film school and got a degree in screenwriting at Columbia. And that was my dream all along, but I was never able to sell a screenplay. I've written maybe 25, and I'm terrible at the whole marketing thing. And I mean, I know I've heard some of your other interviews, and these people really seem quite clued in about the business. And I'm really not clued in to the business at all. I've really always been an outsider and terminally shy and just not able to pitch. And so I just had all these great ideas, and I'd send them to maybe one person, and if they didn't like it, I would just put it in the drawer and move on. So what I was thinking was I could have the greatest idea in the world. I think it's been, I've said before that if I had the idea for Star Wars, I could write the script and it would be the same script that the George Lucas film, and nobody would want it. Nobody would buy it. And someone proved that years ago with Casablanca. They sent the script to Casablanca. They just changed the title, and all the studios turned it down. Which is, it just shows that maybe no one really knows what's good. They're looking for a certain niche, and I know that's a big part of the business is finding out what they want and giving them what they want, and getting the right person attached to it and all that stuff. But I really have only been about the ideas. So I thought if I couldn't even sell Star Wars, what if something else didn't exist that would be actually cinematic? Because you always, as writers, you always try to think, how can this become a screenplay? How could this idea I had become a screenplay? And so my idea was a much more visual and cinematic thing would be to discover that you were the only person who remembered a major music group or musician. And I thought, well, the most quintessential pop music group success was the Beatles, because they weren't just these great songs, but they were also an image. They were like these lovely boys, really funny, and they just hit the right tone at the right time. And I thought if I could just get all the Beatles songs and I was a musician, I probably wouldn't be able to sell a single one. And so that was the premise for the film, that a guy wakes up one day, no one else remembers the Beatles but him. He goes out there, starts playing Beatles songs, and people are a bit meh about it. There's pretty good songs in there. He sells a few, but it doesn't become Beatlemania. And so that's the script that I wrote, and I found a producer for that, and we were pitching it along, and we even were able to possibly clear the Beatles rights. We had an idea that it would cost us, I don't know, maybe $10 million to clear the Beatles rights, which is a big chunk of what's supposed to be a low budget film's budget. And then they showed it to work. They used to work at Working Title, the producers who I was involved with, which is one of the biggest film production companies in England. And they pitched it they were just talking about it to Richard Curtis, who's of course the famous king of the rom-com, probably the most beloved screenwriter in the country. And he liked the idea, and he said, let's buy the script. And so they bought my script, and I feel I was misled a bit as to what they would do with the script, because it was a fairly airtight script. It was rock solid. I figured, well, there's not much they can do to this. And so I signed a deal, and it became eventually the film Yesterday, which has the same premise and a lot of the same ideas, but it goes in a completely different direction, where the person becomes phenomenally successful.
So that's interesting, though. Like, as a writer who sells a script, how involved are you in the process? Like, how involved does it depend, like, per project, or do you have are you allowed to keep writing things on it as it goes along, or how does that work?
It all depends on the situation. In this situation, it was a worst case scenario, because we're talking about someone who's very controlling and has a very strong idea of what works for him. And so I'm not actually all that upset about the fact that he turned it into one of his kind of formulaic rom-coms and took away the whole basic idea that sometimes beautiful, wonderful things are not appreciated in their time. He just made it into, because his life has been great and everything's always worked for him. And so he just made it into, well, of course, ignoring the fact that the Beatles were the Beatles. They were great performers, and these personalities and these images, it was just like the songs. The songs would make you famous overnight, even though it's 50 years later. So anyway, I didn't know that at the time, but I sold the rights, knowing I've been around the business long enough to know that if you sell your script, they can do whatever they want to it. They might involve you, they might not. In this case, they not only didn't involve me, they actually took my name off the script, and when they filled out the forms for submitting it to IMDb and Wikipedia and the film's webpage, they just erased me, which was it was legally wrong as well as morally wrong. So I had to fight to get all those things reinstated. So really, yeah, they took it away from me.
Yeah, that's I mean, obviously that's upsetting, because the idea of, you could have the best thing ever and still not be the one, that's a way more compelling than, hey, guess what? Songs from the 60s would still be popular now. Like, that I can understand how your story is more compelling. But when did you, like, how far along the process did you realize that it wasn't really the story that you were selling? Because now, like, you were hands off, you really couldn't be involved anymore. So did you know about it until, was it when it came out or beforehand?
Soon before it came out, I got a copy of the script from Richard directly, to his credit. He sent it to me, and I could see that it had been changed drastically. And I don't know if you're aware, but I've gone public with my complaint,
Mhm.
and I'm not complaining that they changed the script, because honestly, that is what happens in the film business. I totally get that. What I am complaining is they stole my authorship. It was my idea, and a lot of the scenes are mine. I don't know how familiar you are with the film, but there's like 3 or 4 of the key moments in the film, like the yesterday where he starts singing the song and his friends think it's don't know, think he wrote it, or the John Lennon scene, which is pretty integral to the film, and a lot of the gags. And what happened was Curtis kind of said, I told a reporter that he didn't read my script until after he wrote his first draft, and that got interpreted as he didn't read my script ever, which, as any writer would know, one draft is not a script make.
Mhm.
So anyway, he basically stole my authorship, and that's what I've been trying to get out there, the fact that this happens in the film business. And that's what writers have to worry for, because yeah, I got paid, but I didn't get any credit whatsoever. And so basically you'd think I'd get a big career bump, and I got, if anything, the opposite, because I spoke out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that, yeah. Well, that is a pretty upsetting situation. But on let's move over to a little bit lighter notes for a sec. Now you're also have written some pretty amazing things as well. You have a writing credit for The Simpsons, which is, 96. That's like one of like the height of when The Simpsons were at its best. Yeah. What was it like writing for like such a high profile? I guess animation. It was the biggest animation at the time.
Yeah, and I was a huge fan, so that was super great. And I'm the first to admit that the draft I turned in became 1,000 times better from the writer's table. They just added so many great gags. The episode I wrote was called A Fish Called Selma. Mm-hmm. It's where Marge's sister Selma marries washed-up movie star Troy McClure to kind of quash some of the fishy rumors that have been dogging his career. And I really just laid out the skeleton, and they really filled it up with muscle and skin. They really made it great. So that was wonderful, and of course that came. It makes you so cynical, and I'm really not cynical. I really just want to be funny. It's really all I've ever wanted to do, is just be funny publicly. But the only reason I got to write for The Simpsons is because the head writer at the time, the co-head writer, Josh Weinstein with Bill Oakley, was an old school friend. And that's just how it works, and especially with The Simpsons. The Simpsons is very Harvard-centric, as you guys may have noticed. And I actually wrote for there were all people who worked on the Harvard Lampoon, which is their humor magazine. And I actually worked on the humor magazine at my school, which was like the second best humor magazine, but second best isn't good enough. It's the Stanford Chaparral. And so all my old friends are those guys, but we're like this kind of diverse group of comedy guys, whereas the Harvard Lampoon guys are all like, they went to Letterman and Saturday Night Live and The Simpsons, and they're brilliant. You give them a break; they're brilliant. I give them their due. So yeah, that was my Simpsons adventure.
Now, when writing for The Simpsons, is that like you had a story for The Simpsons specifically, or were you kind of like pitching an idea that was taken by The Simpsons?
I came into the office and I had to pitch ideas, because no one knows. They're like a couple of years ahead at that point. That was, I agree with you. Those were the golden years, I think, the Weinstein-Oakley years, because they really hit their stride and the writing was fantastic, and they were working till all hours of the night. Sorry, turn that down. So Josh invited me to come in and pitch some ideas. So I wrote out maybe 10 or 20 ideas, and I went in there. And they're like, nope, pointing to the board. Look, that's up on the board. Oh, we can't do that one because we've got a different Apu episode coming up and whatever else. And so just give me 20 more. So I went home and did 20 more and came in there, and they were shot down as well. And it just kept on going on this way. And I wasn't feeling discouraged, because I was like thinking, this show's so great that they've covered all these bases. They thought these things out already. And finally, after many of these visits, I came up with an idea, and they were like, maybe doing an episode focused on Troy McClure. And they're always a little worried at that point that any episode that doesn't feature Homer strongly is a problem, because he's their comedy gold. He's their go-to guy to be funny. And this was not a very Homer episode. I don't know if you know the episode well, but he's kind of the secondary character in a lot of scenes in there, just because you need him. You need that level of humor that from a character that you know that well. So finally, I did come up with an idea that they said, yeah, go off and write a draft of that, and I went off and did that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't lean on Homer, which might be a crutch on The Simpsons, bringing in Phil Hartman, is always a special idea.
Everybody loves him. Yeah.
Oh man, what that is a gem. And every time I hear his voice, it's just like this. I'm interested, and I got to pay attention to this episode because he is stunning. Now, along with writing, you've also produced some pretty amazing things. One of which I stumbled upon called Stop Kung Fu, which has Simon Pegg and Eddie Izzard. Now that's a hilarious 6-part BBC series. How did that come across you?
Well, I've been working for quite a long time with a British TV presenter named Jonathan Ross. I was thinking about, he's probably the closest thing to David Letterman that UK has had. He came up in the late 80s as a very young man, and he was the first to do a chat show that was more of a comedy show. So I did he was a fan of a book that I wrote back years ago, and several years later he calls me and says, let's make a TV series based on this idea of this book. So we did that. We became good friends, and then I just kept on working with him through the years, and he said, I want to do a funny show about Kung Fu, and here these guys have some ideas, and they hooked me up with them, and we put the show together. And I can't believe you've seen it, because it's so rare. It's so hard to find, even on YouTube, isn't it?
Well, I really had to find it. Like when I found out that we were going to get the opportunity to interview you, I tried to find as much of the stuff that you have, had your hands on as possible. And that is a really, really funny show. I found some clips on YouTube, and I had to subscribe to, I think, Epix to get another episode.
Wow.
But yeah, I suggest it. It's really, really clever. It's really clever.
Well, thanks so much, Zach. I mean, that's one that no one ever talks about. It came out. My whole career seems to have been like 10 or 15 years too early for posterity. Like it's kind of like the people who worked on the Gary Shandling show. It was such a great show in the early 90s, and yet I don't know if it's even now streamable. It might be barely streamable now.
Yeah, I don't know if you could find it. And that was a show that I grew up watching, and that's kind of what sculpted my comedy, was shows like that. So I think that's why a lot of your projects really hit into my heart a little bit. Because I'm like, oh, this is what I kind of grew up watching and really consuming, and I love that. And it's it is interesting about the Yesterday, because I left that movie. I saw that movie opening day in the theater, and it was something that I remember leaving there going, wow, what a cool idea, but man, just not a good movie. And that's just, it's crazy. And then I kind of just became like, hey, what would you Yesterday if you could? So now, of everything that you've worked on, what's something that you are the most proud of, though?
Well, I sure do like Stop Kung Fu. It's just silly and super funny. It's just taking old Kung Fu film clips and doing comedy things with them, but not like in a making fun way, in a super appreciative way, like how doing something with the old guy with the eyebrows in Kung Fu movies. White eyebrows. I did another series with Jonathan Ross called Japanorama, which is kind of like, you've seen other shows where they go to Japan and they go, oh, look how crazy they are here. Look how wacky. But this was actually, again, like a super appreciative, like these people are amazing kind of show. And yeah, we found lots of crazy stuff. But it's coming from the point of view of these people are superior. We bow down to them. They're great. And we did 3 series of that in Japan. And I think that's probably the best of that sort of show, the best kind of like cultural, funny travel show. Wow. So I think that's really strong. And then some of my early books, but no one cares about books here, right?
Well, Dylan, he's a novelist, so he's
You're right. Nobody cares about books.
Yeah, you're a novelist who's sitting there trying to pitch films.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, you've also directed a couple things. You directed a couple episodes of the Fabulous Picture Show, as well as Funny, Furry, and Famous. Of everything that you've done,
Did you hire a private investigator to learn all these things?
No, I pay for IMDb Pro, so and also I'm getting my license in private investigation, so I've been creeping around for quite a while. No, I'm a very once I lock onto somebody, I get very interested in them for a little bit, and then I throw them away and never think about them again.
Right.
But
no, if you're somebody like me, and it sounds like you may be, I've had that kind of career. It's like I've never really been super successful, or definitely haven't made much money, but I've done all these things that I've wanted to do, and that was one of them. The Fabulous Picture Show. It was actually for Al Jazeera, believe it or not. It was a show about world cinema and kind of like putting it into context of the political or cultural or societal issues that the film's about. But great films. I've always been like a film guy. I have like 2 degrees in film, and I actually worked at the Film Society Lincoln Center for my first job for about 5 or 6 years in the New York Film Festival. So I really, I don't aspire to make classy art films, but I really appreciate them. And so that was like a show that never would have been anywhere else. And, no one would have paid for that show anywhere else in the world, except for Al Jazeera, which has no advertising.
Well,
but of every process of filmmaking or show making, what would you say is your favorite? Is it just the writing, like the getting down and coming up with ideas, or is it being able to complete something?
Well, I'm not the best completer, Zach. So I'd say I guess that must be satisfying for people who complete things. But I love the kicking around ideas part. It's, like I said, I've heard a couple of your episodes, and I actually think that is the most fun part of the whole thing. Is just kind of shaping it and putting it together. I think I think my strengths are probably like getting ideas for stories to become films. As you know, you may have a great idea, but what's the film is the question. Yeah. And I think I'm pretty good at that. But not much of a seller, a salesman, or a completer. So that would be my favorite. And coming up with great gags is always the best. I like to do hundreds of passes on everything I write to just try to make the perfect word. It's like, it doesn't matter, I suppose, the screenwriting, because they change it anyway. But but coming from a writing books background, that's something that really is important to me. It's just that you have the perfect word.
Excellent. Dylan, do you have any questions? I talk a lot, and I apologize to everybody. But Dylan, do you have any questions for Mr. Barth?
Is there? I mean, I don't want to go back to the well necessarily, but you've pulled yesterday or your original cover version from some real life experience. You ever thought about taking this real life experience and trying to do a spiritual sequel?
I have thought about whether the idea itself is sequelable, but I think once it's done, once it's been done, the whole exciting reveal that no one else knows yesterday, like that's a great moment in the film. And then seeing John Lennon, that's a great moment in the film. You can't recreate that the second time around. And as far as if you're referring to writing about my experience, I'm really uncomfortable writing about someone who's that close to myself. Well, it would be me. And not to mention the fact that that would never get made in this country.
That's fair.
It's completely locked to me.
Yeah.
Now, because you were taken off of that film for the most part, are you able to repitch it as what it was supposed to be?
No, someone asked me, because when the story came out, someone said, what if we made this into like a radio play? And I said, well, first of all, Working Title owns my script. So that might be a big, huge hurdle. And especially since it's such a sensitive thing to them, the way they treated me. And also, you couldn't really do it without Beatles music. And that's going to cost you a pretty penny.
Yeah.
So... yeah, I would love to see that film remade with my. I've got a friend named Mackenzie Crook, who's a really fantastic actor, and he's been directing and writing some really great television as well lately. And he was originally going to direct the film as our little independent team, but he got a deal with the BBC to make a series. It's like one of the great series. It's probably not known very much in the States, called Detectorists. It's about a couple of guys who are just have metal detectors, and they go out into a field and they detect it.
All right.
Toby Jones and Mackenzie are the two stars, and it's so British. It's so great. And so he went off to do that, and so we were left without a director, and then it kind of like floundered.
Now, going down the idea of yesterday, if the Beatles did never exist, how would that have sculpted all music though? Because like every musician now is like, oh, I'm inspired by the Beatles. Like that would have changed music drastically.
A lot of people say that, and I'm not convinced that's necessarily true, because they had their own, they were influenced by a lot of other people, and there was another scene of Beatle type music around in the 60s, you know, like Jerry and the Pacemakers and Herman's and all these kind of like not couple 2 or 3 hit wonders. I punt on that one. I don't know. I think what the Beatles did, where they were the first to kind of evolve, and they did it really quickly if you look in retrospect.
Yeah.
But I do think other bands would have come up with the idea of evolving as well over the years. So I'm not convinced. I mean, a lot of people have said, how come music isn't substantially different in the film? And I say, it's not in my film, and it's not in Curtis's film. And think how hard that would be to demonstrate that as well. I mean, you can't really go much for saying Oasis wouldn't exist, something like that.
It would be a lot of extraneous work that doesn't necessarily pay off, I think.
Right.
Yeah, that would really only be for people like me anyway.
Yeah,
all the whining complainers. Yeah,
that's me.
If I got one more question, at least, if you could yesterday one band that is currently big today, who would it be?
That's a good question. I mean, would I have the talent? I mean, because think of a band like, I really like, say, Radiohead, but so much of it is the performance and the voice and the music that the songs themselves, you probably couldn't even sell them. Like, who's a super genius today? Let me throw that back at you guys. Who would you say?
I mean, if I wanted a really easy band to replace, probably something like Imagine Dragons
or Black Eyed Peas.
Just so they're gone.
Yeah, just so they're gone. Get that out of here. Imagine Dragons is such a sellable band, and it's a kind of a unique sound in a weird way.
Yeah. All their big stuff focuses on like a single musical trick.
Yeah.
Right.
It is interesting.
Right. So it's more of the concept of Imagine Dragons is what you
the very concept of
the literal concept of Imagine Dragons is what I would steal. That's cool. Okay, so before we get on to what we do in the show, which is Jack's favorite part, I do have one last question. If you had like a blank check, right, you could do whatever you wanted to do. What concept would you work on?
Well, I've got a couple series ideas that I've been pitching unsuccessfully, and either of them I think could be really massively huge if anybody would pay attention. So it would be one of these two things that I've got now, like for kind of multi-part, multi-series shows that would, my thing is to do things kind of like a low-rent Charlie Kaufman kind of way, where the idea is really outside the box, but then you rein it in and make it human, which he doesn't always do. So it will be one of these. I mean, I want to get into specifics.
No.
I bet a good tip though I know you've a lot of probably writers who watch this, because I wish I could have watched this when I was a young writer. And that is one of the things I've been pitching. I wrote a pilot episode, which is the first episode of a series, but it's very conceptual. And a really smart friend of mine who's a film director, he said, I like the treatment of the series, but I think the pilot episode is not indicative of the series, and it doesn't have all the humor that will be in the series. You should have written episode 5 or something. And he was totally right. I totally screwed that up. So that is my advice. Write the best episode, not just the first episode necessarily.
That's smart.
Stories.
Yeah. What if you got picked up for like an MCU, like big blockbuster budget? Like what would you like? Which one of those would you like to try to tackle in your style?
Well, that's a good question. Do you mean like another person's film, or do you mean one of my ideas? I don't have anything really huge in my
I guess like another person's film, like how Edgar Wright was originally trying to do like a smaller scale Ant-Man
right.
or something like that. Is there would there? Do you have like an idea?
Shame too.
Yeah, I would have loved that.
It would have been
yeah.
That's a really good question. I wish been able to give it some thought, because I don't know. I mean, I also think about mining great old films that are now so old that like most younger people don't know them at all, and doing them in a proper modern way. You know, they couldn't be done, and not just because of special effects, but just kind of sophistication and so on. And I don't know. It's a great question, but I don't have a great answer. Do you guys have an idea of what you would like to do?
Dylan has a Highlander script that he's been working on that is set back in like old farmer times, and I think that's old farmer time, like people don't farm anymore.
We're farming today.
It's a
farmer
little
times like 5 a.m. before the sun rises.
Yeah, before daylight savings time. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's funny. No, I think The Shadow. I would like to redo The Shadow in a real clever way. I don't have a pitch, but more of like a noir style.
I do going back to the radio series.
Yeah, I would love that. And that's kind of our thing anyway.
I do want to send a Terminator back to the Wild West and see what happens.
Yeah.
Where they're like, we're going to stop going after John Connor. We're going to go after his great grandpa in the 1880s.
So instead of Clint Eastwood cleaning up a town, you got the Terminator cleaning up a town. That's actually a really good idea. Just don't call him the Terminator. You can do it.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, Dylan, do you have any more questions, Mr. Barth, before we start pitching ideas and make bigger fools of ourselves?
I think we kind of covered what I had.
Excellent. Okay, Mr. Barth. So we're going to pitch to you 2 original ideas that we have come up with, as original as ideas can be anymore. And preferably, we would like it if you would just choose one of those for us to work on and see what that thing turns into. And I'm going to let Dylan pitch first.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Okay. All right. So you've got a washed up minor league stock car racer, Cale Lonehart Jr., something like that. After a bad race or something along those lines, he drinks in desperation, finds like 120-year-old corn whiskey that was cursed by an Appalachian witch. Passes out, wakes up in the 1920s, and finds a gig as a prohibition driver in Appalachia running moonshine for like the people brewing it there. And then you have the question of like, does he want to go home? Does he want to screw with the timeline a little bit? Like,
is he going to Yesterday NASCAR?
Is he going to Yesterday NASCAR? Minor league stock car racer gets sent back to prohibition and becomes a bootlegger.
Oh, I love that.
But it's successful, like much more success than he has in the current. Okay.
Yeah,
we're gonna hear them both first.
Yeah, please. All right, so I had this idea to do a kind of like a sci-fi thriller comedy, mostly focused around the HR department of this new nuclear like engine company. And the way it works is there is this new style of a nuclear sub that just one day goes missing. And people don't know what it is, if it was destroyed in to start a war, if it was taken for whatever, abducted by aliens. One lonely HR person does not want this company to suffer, so they do their due diligence, and what they discover is that the submarine has been shrunk. A lot of people thought it was sunk until you add HR to it. Shrunk.
Like basing a film on a pun.
Hey, I mean, this is season 2. We're stretching kind of thin now. Okay, so Mr. Barth, which one of these 2 weird things, whatever they're going to be, would you like us to work on, probably out of punishment?
What's your running score right now between the 2 of you?
I'm leading by a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I don't want your pity.
I think it's
It's not about pity. I just wanted to make sure that Dylan wasn't creaming you, because I like Dylan's idea better. I just think I don't see the drama yet in your. I mean, obviously you build it up, but I like the whole Southern Gothic kind of noiry stock car prohibition guy. I mean, I know it would be a bit. How much comedy are we talking about in the stock car guy film?
I mean,
it's witch enchanted moonshine.
it wouldn't be a bleak story by any means, but you would treat it with the drama that it deserves.
Yeah.
And it's an inherently goofy concept, so
Right.
And old Appalachia is a scary place too. So
Well, yeah, and I see it like being dark, and the sun sets early because the mountains,
yeah.
and lots of like just scary people everywhere, and I think if you take a crazy idea but treat it seriously, you can really engage the viewer more. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I like that idea a lot because you can have action scenes with the driving, and you obviously he's the whole idea. Also, I've always thought I've got a lot of time travel ideas in my mind, or similar things to that, and I feel that so many time travel movies, the person really enjoys going back in time or forward in time, and then they have to decide, oh, do I want to go back to where I have a choice? I can go back to where I was, or I can stay here. And it's like, but if I go back there, if I stay here, then my child will never be born, and I can't face that. And I actually wrote a script where he decides, well, fuck it. I'm having a much better life now. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, my child's not going to be born, but I might have a better one.
I told my daughter that to her face. I was like, if I can ever time travel, you will not exist.
Yeah. So, I know my daughter probably would not like that much, but seriously, they always wimp out, and they always, it's like, this character will become unsympathetic if you do that. And I think a lot of people go, well, actually, I might make the same choice, because he's having a much better life. Isn't it better to just have a much better life?
Yeah, I agree.
You know that you're going to have a better life when you decide not to have a child.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's always the people that stay in the past. It seems like they sacrifice themselves. It's always like the sad part. It's like, you're going to stay? But how can you stay? Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
You go. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
I've got to fight the good fight here.
Yeah.
But I do think it should be, that would be nice. A nice thing to do is to not have him have this dilemma. He's just like, this is great. And maybe he has to fight not being pulled back. I don't know how that would work. Maybe the witch's grandmother offers him some moonshine, and he looks at her and is like, wait a second.
He just has to keep drinking the moonshine to stay anchored in the 1920s. And then he's like, wait a minute, if I run out of this, okay, I have to find the witch.
Yeah.
So he has to find the witch 120 years ago in the past and be like, this isn't going to make a lot of sense to you. You curse. And she goes, no. I exist outside of time.
Right.
I know what you were going to add, like that sort of thing.
All right.
See, this is part of the pitch meeting where you say silly things, and then you kind of have to come in for a landing. But because I do feel like it should be treated logically with some seriousness, even though it can be light, and it can maybe he does invent a proto NASCAR. I mean, obviously they had car races back then, but how did NASCAR change car racing? Did it just kind of like make it more organized?
Well, NASCAR was originated from bootleggers that actually, had their own route. So I guess if he were on the cusp of that, he'd be the first NASCAR, whatever stock car champion guy.
You could resolve the time travel conflict pretty early on, and then have him try to invent NASCAR earlier than normal. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? Driving cars fast? Like, it'll never catch on.
And he's still not that good of a driver because he doesn't have an automatic.
What if they crash? People will hate that.
All right, so it looks like we're gonna choose Dylan's idea and work on this weird witch-infested moonshine NASCAR time trip. Okay, so Mr. Barth, so you have an idea, you have a stupid idea, and it just clicks you. I'm gonna work on something that's about time travel, NASCAR, moonshine. What's like the first thing that you work on? Are you like like Dylan likes to do bullet points? He tries to hit like, here's where these stories should go. Some people work on their arc structure. What's like your initial process?
Well, even though I think of myself as being someone's breaking all the rules, I actually do believe in 3-act structure to a large extent. And I would kind of break it down into 3 acts. The first act being generally the first 25%, second act being the middle 50%, and the third act being the last 25%. And I know there's all these books that tell you need like an inciting incident. You need at the end of Act 1 and at the end of Act 2, you need a knot where it's like it's tied so tight they'll never get out of it. And then in Act 3, they get out of it. But I don't think you need to do that. But I do think you need to show that it's a film by putting it in 3-act structure. Like first act, he's back in the 1920s, he realizes his situation and he starts trying to figure out what he's going to do. And the second act, it all develops. And the third act, the decision to stay and the big race. I guess there has to be the big race, doesn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first NASCAR race, he has to, is he going to win that?
Ooh.
And maybe he doesn't, because who cares?
Maybe if he goes too fast, he goes back to the future, and he can't win if he goes slow enough.
You could kind of make a reference to that, actually, because I don't think that's anything. That's not kosher, is it? You could say, oh, but there's that film Back to the Future. If I go 86 miles an hour.
Yeah.
They're like, what? I've never heard of that.
This was 1918.
You'll never hit that speed. Are you kidding?
What's a gigawatt? Okay. So, well, when you have an idea like this, and you have and it's kind of like just the very start of an idea, how do you know what it's going to be? Do you set out to write like a feature film? Do you set out to do like a sitcom? My voice is cracked. That's cool. Or do you let the story kind of do what it has to do?
Well, that's a good question. I'm someone who, as I said, I listen to some of your podcasts, and I do, or what do you call them? They're not podcasts. What are they?
No, they're podcasts.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And the people that you spoke to and the ones I saw were really clued in. They lived in LA, or they were connected to LA, and they knew the business and they knew about the pitch. And I'm not like that. I really just care about the script. And I know that sounds really noble, but it's bad because it doesn't lead to success. But that really is all I care about, is what form it should take. And I don't care if it's, I've written some things that, especially in the past, that would never fly today for various reasons.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I would start thinking, though, about doing things in terms of series, because it seems like that the money's coming from the streamers, and the streamers want series, and theatrical releases seem to be going anyway to where there will only be the big films. You're never going to get a small film except at a film festival, which is just a vanity thing. It's not going to actually be viable. So I'd probably try to see if it could be a streaming series. The last two things, as I said, I worked on were both streaming series. This one could be. I mean, the NASCAR one, because you can have lots of, race in every episode and blah, blah, blah. I was talking to my writer friends. We do a weekly Zoom, and they were saying how everyone, the buzzword now in the pitch meetings is all killer, no filler. And it's like, but you're taking a 90-minute idea and trying to stretch it into 8 hours.
Yeah.
That's actually a pretty interesting point you brought up. Now, can any movie really, if you're using a 3-act structure, could you really turn it into say a 9-episode series just by, I guess, working on it? Can anything really be a series from a movie?
Not anything, but I was just reading. I didn't even realize recently that the show Succession was originally a feature film, and there's an example of one that they really, killed it. They just these characters all deserve a lot more breathing space, and they got it, and it's a brilliant series. I think it's
that is one of the best well-written shows I've watched recently. I'm in the middle of rewatching it right now.
Yeah. So it can happen, but not everything can become a series. Especially, the things that really get on my nerves are documentaries. That gets, it's hard enough to watch a 90-minute documentary, but to see 8 hours where it's just kind of a lot of repeats and so on, it's unbearable. So they've kind of killed that format. Anyway, coming back to what you're talking about, I would say I might try and see if it could be a multi-part series, but the idea is the idea, and it a lot of my ideas are twist at the end, and a twist at the end doesn't really work with a multi-part series as much as it works with a feature film.
True. So with this idea, I guess once you have the idea, then the first thing you think is okay, I guess let's just work on this as it's a film. So Dylan, let's work on this as though it's going to be a film. It feels like a film.
Sure.
So we'll do that. So we're gonna put in the 3-act structure now. So you have the idea. How far into the process do you work on your character development? We've talked to some people, and the thing they need to know the most is, who are these people? We've talked to some people and go, I get to the end, I need to know what the end is, and then work back there. What is the next kind of step that you take?
I know a lot of people have a process. I kind of vary it depending on what the idea is. For example, if it's one of these streaming series, I try to think, well, how does it play out over 10 episodes? like what happens in each one and how does it build and how do you get all killer, no filler. And the characters are obviously super important in that, maybe even more important than in film, because the film can be driven by action or plot. But in a multi-part series, you need the characters people to care about the characters and engage with them. I would say I very rarely will just sit down page one and start writing a script. I did that one time, and like I've done it twice, and both times around page 40, I just stopped because I thought, I don't know what to do now, because it's so much nicer to have a treatment in front of you that you don't have a blank page. You got the treatment. You can just plow through and get a first draft done, and then kind of see what you need to do with the characters and everything else. When I did a cover version, I actually wrote like a 10-page treatment for that. The final script ended up being almost exactly what was in that treatment. I mean, very few changes. Mackenzie Crook worked on some of it with me, and he came up with some really great things to kind of like tighten up scenes, so like two scenes become one, and how you learn something is more cinematic than the way I had just someone tells him. And so that one was really a plotting step-by-step treatment, but sometimes it really will be just let's explore and play with this stuff. I mean, Richard Curtis, for all his foul deeds, is a brilliant writer, and he says he does these things where he just has a conversation with the two characters for 45 minutes and just kind of has a scene with them where they just talk it up and talk, and it gives him an idea of what they're all about and how to boil it down. And that's a pretty good tip.
So I'm someone that I like to have probably 3 or 4 projects in front of me that I can kind of go in between, and I maybe have an idea it's better for one thing or whatever. Dylan, I think it's he's more focused. He spends a lot of time on one thing at a time, at least for the sake of this question. What are you someone that needs a couple things to work on because you have that kind of comedic mind, or do you try to really focus on one project at a time and give it all you got?
Well, and again, everything I say needs to be put through the filter of he's only told one script in 40 years. I have like right now a list of like 25 ideas that I think are all great, and I kind of, some of them I've done as completed screenplays, some of them are just ideas, some of them are treatments, and when I'm kind of just looking for ideas, I go into there. Obviously fresh ideas come along, but I go into there and think, well, what if I got any fresh ideas of how to develop this thing, or even just to rewrite a script that already exists. And so I have 25 balls in the air at once, but they're not always. Sometimes I put them away for a year or more.
Nice. All right, so let's hop back into this idea. So we have this guy who we got to kind of work on him a little bit, and he needs to have some kind of drama in his present life, right? To make the going into the past something. It needs to be a big deal. So, Dill, what do you think needs to happen to this man in the beginning? What kind of thing needs to be going on with him so that when he goes to the past, it's either better or questionable?
If we want to make him a driver where he just likes the act of going fast and like outrunning people, then we could make it, we want to make if we want him to stay in the past, we want it to be more appealing. So if we want to like have him somehow be like restrained by the structure of the sport or like the format of NASCAR where like he has some sort of negative impression of like the rules as they stand, or there's some sort of internal politic that makes it harder for him to just drive.
Yeah. So is he like a cheater of sorts? Like if he were a baseball player, would he be like a juicer kind of thing?
I don't think he's a cheater. Or
is he like a bad boy outside of the squared circle?
Yeah, I think he has trouble. I think he has trouble fitting into their rigidity.
Right. So that now he's running from something, right? That's how he's going to go back in time, right? Because that's always kind of how it goes. He's like, on the run from something, and then boom, whiskey, something, and then he's back in time, and he's got to figure out. First, he's got to learn that he's back in time, which is always that cool scene. But is he running from something, or is it an accidental time travel?
I think it's accidental. I'm seeing him like rage driving, which I don't endorse. But he's like he's like, I'm stuck on driving is great. I'm stuck on a track. So I go through these Appalachian mountain back roads and I take them intentionally faster than I should because I don't value my own existence beyond the feeling I get when I go fast.
All right.
And somehow he like comes across a witch like crossing the road and maybe she's leading like a goat or something. She's like a, mountain woman, something like that. And he maybe swerves to miss her and ruins his car or something that she has to like, I've taken you in, you owe me. So, and you get that the thing. And that's how he obtains the whiskey.
Is it a curse or is it like a present?
Or
does he like steal it?
Different sides of the same coin.
Like, I mean, is it given to him under like negative premise? Like, is it like under a bad guise, or is it like, hey, you've earned this?
I wonder if the witch is just like, well, you're complaining about nowadays. Here, drink this. And all right, sure. Hey, if you don't like being here, I'll send you somewhere else.
All right. What do you think, Mr. Barth? Which of these kind of things should be like kind of a push to get him right before he goes into the past? Does any of this jive with you?
I don't know that this is the most important thing, though. I think it'll probably come to you, and it should just be a funny scene to watch, an interesting scene. Like, maybe he swerves to avoid the lambs and he hits her, and he thinks he's killed her, and she goes flying through the air, 100 yards, and then she just kind of like, he's like, oh. And she gets up and starts floating. I don't know, something.
Yeah.
Where it's like clearly, I guess I didn't kill her, but she is floating.
All right. Well, I guess what I meant is, does he know that he's going to go back in time?
Well, if he does, then you lose the kind of fun of he just kind of wakes up with a hangover from the corn liquor, and he's in 20?
Yeah, 1920s.
Yeah. All right, cool. I'm gonna. All right. So, Dylan, where is he in the world? Like, where is this? Is this Southern Appalachia?
Right? Yeah, probably like. Oh man, I was imagining Georgia for some reason.
Because they have great tax structures there, don't they?
They do. I didn't do that research, but it turns out they do. All right, I'm into that. Now, what does he have a family? Is he leaving something behind? And like the past is better for him, or because that is intriguing. What Mr. Barth said, like if you have something and you have to decide, like I'm going to leave my wife and child because this is just a better life. I think that's
estranged. Like he's driven everybody away, or like they've left him, or something along the lines. Because I don't know if we make the central conflict, does he stay in the past? Then we wouldn't need him to have something that could potentially draw him back into the present. Like it can't just all be like, man, I had nobody back there and I didn't like what I was doing. And I mean, it's the 1920s, but like,
yeah. So what? So if he's like a bad dad or something, and he's like, if I stayed here, I would have never been a bad dad to begin with.
Maybe his son is a complete jerk. He's like a bully, but he's Biff, and just sort of.
I love that.
If he didn't exist, and I know I screwed up with him, but it's too late. He's too old to change now.
Yeah, he's a punk. I can't.
His ex-wife and her new husband ruined his son.
Yeah. Really bad.
Oh, I love that. And that's even him, like, not really even owning up to responsibilities. Like, well, I guess I could go back and work hard and try to fix this, or I could just erase it. Yeah, I'm into that. Okay, so then the middle chunk of this movie is this person in the past, and they're deciding if they want to spend time in the past, and they're a racing phenomenon, right? And they're kind of like the precipice for I guess stock car racing. And he's like, hey, like what would you like to see him doing in the middle of this, Dylan?
In the middle of the movie in general?
Yeah, like the second act. Like what would you like the second act to kind of be mostly encapsulating?
I think we should probably have some sort of conflict that he gets into when he's in the 1920s. Like, I kind of like the idea that he gets sent back and he's like, oh, wow, okay. I guess this is what I'm doing now. And he just immediately is just like, I'm just a dude who drives cars. I have no idea what sent me back in time. He gets a job at like a bar or something. And then maybe he comes into conflict with some locals, and that is kind of like and he uses some of his modern day what we consider common knowledge, but was unknown to them back then, to like appear to be some sort of super clever kind of like roguish someone. And he's like, I just know that when you mix X and Y together, it creates Z. And they're like, I don't know who you are, but
what's nitro?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Okay. Their gas tank? Well, it turns out if you put sugar in their gas tank, it goes really badly.
Yeah.
I like the idea that he's not that bright. Like he's not like, if he were a great mechanic, I bet if you actually got to a level where you're pitching to a studio, they'd probably say, what if he were like a brilliant a really great mechanic, and then he goes back and he can invent cars that don't exist yet and things that don't exist for cars. And you think, well, that's too easy. You see, then he becomes successful. Oh, what does that sound like? I actually wrote another time travel movie about a guy who goes back to the 1930s, but he's like a normal guy. He's like me. He's like, I don't know how to invent television. It's like, I know it exists, but I don't know how to actually make a television. And so he just can't, there's nothing much he can do. He ends up just betting on World Series that he remembers.
Yeah, that was like one of our ideas. The guy goes back and past, and he couldn't do anything because like his money is from now, and everybody's like, "What's this money? Like, why is this orange? Like, who's what's that?" All right, so do we do the trope where he meets someone in his family but from ago? Is that something you like to see in this, Dylan?
We could. That might.
Appalachia has a good chance they'd still be there.
That's fair. A lot of old families in that area, and that gives him something familiar to kind of like relate to, whereas it wouldn't just be strangers. He's like, that's my great grandpappy.
So he just tells him he's his cousin. Hey, that's my cousin over there. It's like, I don't remember you.
Listen, I'm your great grandson from 100 years in the future, and the guy's just like, not the craziest thing I've heard from someone in this bar. Sure, get on behind the counter.
That's the whiskey talking.
I think this would benefit from taking a lot of the standard kind of time travel tropes and just kind of like, yeah, sure, okay, yeah, we're doing a time travel movie. We're not gonna worry too much about the nitty gritty time travel stuff because nobody in this movie cares.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I think
great idea. Like he goes into a diner and asks for a Pepsi free, and they just hand him a Pepsi. Not the old Michael J. Fox joke.
And it's like, how much? It's like, you wanted this free.
You said you wanted it for free.
All right. All right. So what we got to do is we're going to take some time and really kind of work on these tropes of time travel and make them actually funny instead of tropey. And you can find us doing that kind of stuff on Twitching Upstream, which is our Tuesday show where we take, ideas that we come up on here and then with the help of our audience, sculpt them into something and work on them until they're actually something that can be watched or listened to or read. Mr. Barth, thank you so much for spending your time with us. We really appreciate it. It is honestly just conversations like this that really push us and give us that fuel to keep creating and keep trying to, do what you're doing, selling a script and being let down by it, really, which I think is okay.
Good luck on that.
Yeah, that's our next step. We just got to be disappointed in our own work later on. Okay.
Pretty well.
Yeah. Mr. Barth, where can people find you? What would you like anyone to watch or to listen to or to investigate for you?
Read all about my dispute with Richard Curtis. Just Google that.
All right. I'll put as many show links that as possible down there.
I've also put the original script for cover version up online. You can find a link on Twitter.
Cool.
Because a lot of people don't do that. But I just wanted to prove to people that there actually was a good script.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So if you're watching this or listening to this, you'll find the show notes to all that. You'll find the links to all that in the show notes down there. Just want to thank all of our friends out there, people on Patreon, for helping us, do what we're doing. We love that. You can see our new show, PowerPoint Showdown, where things are going crazy over there. And also our award-winning podcast, No Time to Binge, where we watch just the first episode and last episode of something and make up the middle. Mr. Barth, once again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Keep working on that stock car movie. Sounds good.
Oh, don't worry, we're going to. Dylan, do you have anything to say to anybody before we get out of here?
Nah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, until next time, everybody. He has been Mr. Jack Barth. He has been Dylan Terry. I have been Zach Wiseman, and you've been great. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.